So I don't think I've made it any secret that in general, uh, I generally prefer Europe in a lot of ways. I prefer the way things are done in Europe. I prefer a lot of the policies there, the way the government works, the way society works, etc. However, one thing that I've noticed as of late is that Americanization in Europe has actually been increasing. And not only that, but I think from the experience I've had personally speaking to European right wingers online, a lot of them seem to be in very severe denial about it because a lot of them are utterly convinced, no, we are immune to the threat of cultural Americanization. Or American globalism. Because when I say Americanization, I really mean the shitty aspects of American culture. Like, I don't mean they're embracing the good aspects of American culture, unfortunately. I wish they were. But no, they're embracing. Well, I sort of do and sort of don't because I want Europe to remain European. But I'm saying, let me put it this way: there are some areas in which they could learn a little bit from America, and there's other areas where they most certainly can't learn anything good. And what they're embracing is the shittier aspects of American culture, the lowest common denominator aspects, which I think is the entire problem with the freedom mentality. Because when you give people the freedom to do whatever the fuck they want unrestricted, they, generally speaking, the majority of people will always go with the lowest common denominator. This is the problem with free market capitalism. It is the problem with any kind of society that doesn't place restrictions on anything. And for the record, I do believe in freedom of speech, but that's pretty much the only area where I believe people should be able to do whatever the fuck they want unrestricted. I think if it's not freedom of voicing an opinion, of holding an opinion or voicing an opinion, there's a lot of areas where personal freedom do need to be restricted. And I'm going to talk about this in this video, the areas in which Europe is becoming Americanized in a bad way. And again, as I've said, I think many people on the European right are in severe denial about this. They insist it's not happening. They insist they're totally immune from these problems, but they're actually not. And I will link to numerous articles that back me up. Every one of these things is happening, and it's happening at an increasing rate. So I'm going to go through them one by one. Firstly is the flourishing of rap music. Now, rap music, as we all know, originated in the United States. It originated among Black Americans. However, it has aggressively spread throughout the world and in Europe, among other places. Like, again, these problems aren't specific to Europe. Like, a lot of these are happening across the entire globe, but I'm focusing mostly on Europe because A, Europeans are the ones who deny that these problems can happen there, and B, because frankly, like, I like Europe and I care about Europe. So, and I view Europe as a very important part of the most important part, frankly, of Western civilization. So yeah, rap music. Rap music is vastly increasing in popularity in Europe in recent decades. And I can attest to this personally. Like, when I go to Europe, I hear a lot of people blaring rap music from their cars or from their phones or whatever. And a lot of it is teenagers, but some of it's even people in their like 20s, 30s, not so much 40s, but like I'd say even 30s. Like I'd say even like mid to late millennials. Like I'm seeing plenty of people in Europe, like including a lot of white people, blaring rap music, but also obviously including the immigrant demographics. Like, as I've said many times, insofar as immigrants to Western countries integrate, they often integrate into Black American culture, even if they're not in America. So rather than say like integrating into French culture in France or integrating into German culture in Germany or British culture in Britain, what they do is they integrate into Black American culture, but they sort of transpose Black American culture onto the country they're in. So what that basically means is more often than not, it's rap music in the language of the country they're in, but it's still just, it sounds exactly the same as American rap music, only in a different language. And we get that in pretty much every country in Western Europe, even in Eastern Europe these days, in countries that don't have a huge immigrant population. It's really bad. Like it's completely out of control. Like And I think rap music, it's just so lowest common denominator, and it's just everywhere. And also, in addition, there's also the problem in, especially in Spain and Portugal, of like Latin American, like dunka, 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 like that kind of music. Like that kind of shit is really spreading in Iberia also. But yeah, rap music also there and in the rest of Europe. So yeah, I mean, that is one big aspect of Americanization, is that kind of music spreading. I would even consider the spread of Latin music in Iberia to some extent Americanization, because that kind of music is huge among Latin Americans also. And I think it is heavily the Latin American like Latin Americans in the United States. I mean, I think a big part of it is that influence also. So yeah, I mean, the cultural influence of the shitty aspects of American culture can definitely be felt through the aggressive spread of rap music in Europe. Another example is the spread of car culture. Now, ever since the big event in 2020, fewer people have been riding transit, more people have been driving cars, but this trend has been going on even longer than that. It's just been accelerated by the big event. Car culture is massively spreading. The total proportion of people driving is increasing, despite the fact that gas prices are a lot higher in Europe. And I think, unfortunately, electric cars might be an enabling factor here, because they're like, oh, electric cars are good for the environment. It's like, they're not as good as people taking transit. They're in between gas cars and transit in terms of the environmental impact, but probably closer to gas cars. Like, they're not great for the environment because, A, if the electricity comes from fossil fuels, or B, obviously you got to take into account the manufacturing related emissions, also manufacturing and upkeep of these cars. And plus just the sprawl created on behalf of these vehicles and all the natural ecosystems it destroys. So yeah, all things considered, yeah, car culture is massively spreading in Europe. Anecdotally, I will say, when I was in Salerno, Italy, a town near Naples, I was shocked and disgusted by the fact that they were actually tearing up a major portion of the beachfront park there. It's a very beautiful park. They were tearing up a big portion of it so they could build a parking garage. It absolutely disgusted me. Like, frankly, this isn't even something you would see in the United States or Canada now. It's like, I think we've already reached rock bottom in this regard, and there's nowhere to go but up. But yet, in Europe, what scares me is that they could be reaching that point. Like, they could be getting into their own 1950s because they haven't hit rock bottom yet like we have. So they might actually be getting worse in that regard. And seeing that happen in a historic town in Italy really disgusted me. Like, that they're tearing up a portion of this beautiful waterfront park in order to build a fucking parking garage. It's really gross. It's like they haven't learned from the 1950s and 60s and 70s all the disgusting excesses of car culture, because they haven't hit rock bottom like we have. And again, like, it's just really bad that something like that would be happening there. But yeah, I also see all the time online, especially Polish people, complaining about transit and wanting to drive everywhere. And it's interesting because Poland is one of the countries, according to the statistics I saw, where automobile use is increasing the most. And you can't really blame immigration there. You can't really say, oh, they don't want to be on a crowded tram full of brown people, because it's like, there's not that many brown people in Poland. I don't think so. I mean, maybe immigration has increased there a bit lately, but I don't think it's that many. So yeah, I'm sorry, but like, you can't use that excuse in Poland. I think it's just the cultural spread of Americanization. I don't think it's necessarily just a reaction to like the social problems created by mass immigration. Because again, if it was, then why is Poland one of the worst countries for this? So yeah. Actually, according to stats I saw, although public transit use as a percentage of total trips is decreasing throughout Europe and automobile use is increasing, interestingly, public transit has increased in certain specific countries despite overall decreasing in Europe. And the countries where it's increased, from what I saw, were actually like Sweden and the Netherlands. So if anything, like, I'm thinking like the idea that it's about immigration it's kind of disproven by that because the countries where it's increasing seem to be more in the former Eastern Bloc countries. So yeah, I don't know. It seems like they're getting their taste of capitalism and wealth, and they're going a bit too far with it. Like, I think that's what's happening over there. So yeah, another big thing is not just cars, but specifically SUVs and pickup trucks. From statistics I've seen lately, SUVs are now over half the new cars sold in Europe. And frankly, that's what happens. When you introduce these things, it becomes a fucking arms race where people feel unsafe in anything but an SUV because of all the other SUVs on the road. And yeah, SUVs have massively increased in sales in Europe lately, not to mention pickup trucks aren't nearly as widely proliferated there, but they're starting to be. Like and that's how the arms race goes. First it's sedans, then it's SUVs, then it's pickup trucks. Like nowadays in the United States and Canada, it's like people don't feel safe in an SUV anymore because of the pickup trucks. So it's like they have to go to the next level in the fucking vehicular arms race. And yeah, Europe isn't quite there yet, but give it a few decades and you're going to see all these fucking Texas-style massive pickup trucks trying to squeeze down narrow medieval alleyways. It's going to start getting really bad. So yeah, that's another way. Another aspect is fast food. Fast food mega chains have been increasing in proliferation throughout Europe, especially for some reason France. I find that interesting. The French, they have a reputation for being snooty, but no, they're embracing the lowest common denominator garbage, like the fucking goy slop. So I don't know if France in particular is having problems with that, but apparently across Europe also. And yeah, I can say anecdotally, I do see more and more of these fast food mega chain restaurants, especially McDonald's, Starbucks, Subway, Domino's, and Burger King. Not so much Taco Bell or Wendy's. Those ones I don't think are in Europe as much. I know Taco Bell is only in a few countries. I'm not sure if Wendy's is in any European countries. I think it's in the UK, but I'm not sure. But yeah, they're not as widely proliferated, but a lot of them are. And also Pizza Hut. Did I mention Pizza Hut? Yeah. If anything, Burger King actually seems more common in Europe than here in Canada. I'm not sure where it is more common per capita, but as a proportion of mega chains, it definitely seems higher in Europe. But yeah, that's increasing there, and accompanying it, obesity is also increasing. Again, that's direct causal effect right there. People eat more goy slop, there's more obesity. And anecdotally, I would say when looking at the fast food places there, when I was in Europe, like I didn't eat there, but I did go there to use the bathroom. And I noticed they're always full of teenagers. It's always like multiracial groups of teenagers. Those seem to be the number one demographic that frequents these fast food mega chain restaurants in Europe. And yeah, they seem to be everywhere there. One thing that would be interesting to see is how much tourists use them, because I've seen it both ways. Because there's some tourists who's like, oh, where's the McDonald's? It's like they come to Europe and the first thing they want to do is eat the same crap as back home. But I've also seen a lot of tourists who go out of their way to reject that stuff when they travel because they're like, yeah, I want the authentic experience. I don't want to be bombarded with this goy slop like back home. So I don't know. Do tourists per capita eat at fast food restaurants more or less than the locals? I am not sure on that one. But it would be interesting to see. But from anecdotally, I would say the people who I see there the most is teenagers by far. And one thing I've also noticed about the fast food chains in Europe is like at the McDonald's in Europe, they seem to go out of their way to really play like American music. But not only that, they seem to always play this like kind of like black sex music from the 70s. Like, I'm so in love with you. I don't know what to do. You make me feel so brand new. Or like, let's get it on. We're all sensitive people, let's get it on. Or what's that other song? Like, my darling, I can't get enough of your love, babe. Like, they always play those specific songs at McDonald's in Europe over and over and over and over. And I can't help but wonder, is there some like programming, brainwashing thing going on there? Like, trying to promote this idea of like the sexy, suave, Lothario black man with soul. Oh, he got so much soul. He's smooth. He funky. He got soul. Like, are they really trying to like push this idea on specifically European white female teenagers by constantly bombarding them with this music every time they go to McDonald's? I don't know. I mean, judging by the groups of teenagers I see there together and the types of couples I see among them, yeah, it seems to be working if that's the intention. So yeah, I apologize for subjecting everyone to my terrible singing there, but yes, that is a thing in Europe. So what else is increasing? Oh, and by the way, I'm sure some people in the comments are going to call me a cuck for pointing this out. It's like, no, a real alpha Chad buries his head in the sand and pretends that none of these things are happening. Yeah, okay. I see that so much among right-wing men these days, and it's such a stupid fucking mentality. Like, oh, you're a cuck for pointing out the fact that this is happening. You should be a based, real Chad and just pretend like it's not happening. Like, fuck off with that shit. And yeah, obesity is increasing also in Europe. Like, anecdotally, I don't see that many overweight people there compared to back home, but you know what? I could still believe that it's increasing. It could be that it just doesn't look like that many because I'm used to seeing a lot more. But yeah, it is, statistically speaking, yes, obesity is on the rise in Europe, and I'm sure these fast food mega chains are probably the main culprit. So yeah, as they are the main culprit over here. So yeah, it's again, like, it's the combination. It's not just unhealthy food, it's unhealthy and cheap food. It's unhealthy, cheap, and addictive. And it also it taps into this like nostalgia that people have. Like, these fast food restaurants, they go out of their way. Like, they have entire teams of researchers devoted to like how to like exploit childhood nostalgia as much as possible and get people emotionally hooked to this food. It's the same reason people post these stupid fucking memes about like, oh, I miss the 1990s McDonald's restaurants, or oh, I miss Blockbuster Video. It's like people, they get obsessed with this like corporatized nostalgia. And to be honest, as much as I hate to say it, right-wingers are probably more vulnerable to this than left-wingers, because right-wing people seem to be inherently nostalgic to some extent, and these corporations, these megacorps, they really exploit it. It's like, obviously, yeah, Blockbuster isn't a megacorp anymore. It just has one location in Bend, Oregon. But yes, at one point it was a huge ass megacorp. Okay, and it's this whole culture that they constantly exploit. So yeah, the final thing I'm talking about here is suburbanization. Now, yes, according to statistics, suburbanization is increasing in Europe. Now, what I don't know is, what does this European suburban sprawl actually look like compared to American suburban sprawl? Because again, people can use the word suburbia to refer to a lot of things. So does this mean that like American style, like sprawled out, like North American style sprawled out suburbia is increasing in Europe? Maybe, I don't know. Anecdotally, I haven't seen a ton of neighborhoods like that in Europe. Bizarrely, I actually saw a little bit more in Hungary, but it doesn't look quite like American style sprawl. And I saw a bit in the UK, but again, not like everywhere. In the UK, a lot of it's more like townhouses and semi-detached, which is like often still dense enough to support a good public transit network. But again, the public transit issues in the UK are largely because of the privatization of transit, which has been disastrous for them, not necessarily because of low population density. But yeah, is suburban sprawl an increasing issue in Europe? I mean, maybe. I'm not convinced on that one from personal experience, but nonetheless, I could see it being true, because Americanization seems to take hold in every other way. So is it taking hold in that way too? I mean, according to articles I'm seeing, yes, but again, I'm not sure what they're defining as suburban sprawl. So, I mean, that one I'm a little bit more agnostic on, but I could see it happening for sure. because every other trend of Americanization, this lowest common denominator, globalist American culture, does seem to be spreading in Europe. So, I mean, could I see suburban sprawl spreading there too? Yes, absolutely. It's just they're a bit limited in terms of land. But the thing is, sprawl will find a way. Like, even if there's no land left, it's like, fuck you. We're going to build on the farmland and we're going to just start growing everything in a fucking lab rather than eating actual food because fuck you. We need our McMansions. So, yes, I mean, I could see it happening. Like, lowest common denominator, free market, capitalist human nature does seem to always find a way to just consume everything in its path, even if it fundamentally goes against nature and it goes against the population density and it goes against basic logic and sanity. Now, there has been some pushback against all these trends. Paris, for instance, has taken steps to charge people for using SUVs in the city. I don't know how those kinds of laws are enforced, but apparently they are doing this, and I commend them for doing this. I support this. I support more laws like this. Montenegro has apparently banned McDonald's, and I support that. I support more laws like that throughout Europe. I support us doing similar things here in North America. It's just that unfortunately we're worse because we're the originators of all this crap. We're the patient zero. But yes, I mean, it's kind of like that quote in Captain America, the first Captain America film, when this German guy who's helping them out says, "Oh, the first country is the first country that the Nazis invaded was their own." Well, I could flip that quote and say the first country that lowest common denominator Americanist globalism ruined was America. Like, the first country that it took over was America, and the second country, frankly, was Canada. And third is probably Australia and New Zealand. And then it spreads to the UK and then to the rest of Europe, basically. That's how it usually works. So yeah, and I would also argue even within America, it tends to originate. I would say a lot of this shit tends to originate in the Sun Belt states and then spreads northward. So, I mean, that's where it really originates. A lot of it is, frankly, the Sun Belt, whether it be California, Texas, Florida, what have you, or, the Southwest, the southern states, the entire Sun Belt region, basically. But yeah, anyone who's denying that the spread of Americanization in Europe is happening is just, they're lying, they're coping, and they're deluded, because this is a real problem and European countries need to start addressing it with laws, frankly. They need to start legislating against this shit. Because while I do believe in freedom of speech, I don't believe in the freedom of the free market to do whatever it wants, to to promote the lowest common denominator and play upon people's lower impulses. I think a lot of this shit should be banned by law, and not only in Europe, but here too. But in Europe, it would be, let me put it this way, in Europe, they have more of a fighting chance. Here, it's going to be an uphill battle. Even in Europe, it's already an uphill battle, but here it's going to be an even steeper uphill battle. But yeah, those are my thoughts on all that.